This is the Mvskoke Gardening series. Today our topic is going to be insects in your garden, both pests and beneficials. So plants and insects have a very special relationship, so it's only natural that you're going to find insects in your garden. So today we're going to start by covering some of the pests, some of the bad insects in your garden. One that's extremely super common that you're almost guaranteed to find every year is aphids. They're typically green, small, soft-bodied insects. Sometimes when they're really mature, they're more orange or yellow. But one way you can identify aphids is basically just looking at the overall health of your plant. If you have any leaves that are kind of curling or damaged like this, what I would do is just flip that over and you're almost guaranteed to find some aphids on the other side. Aphids feed on plant sap, so that's why they're damaging the leaf of your plant. They also can transmit plant diseases, so that could potentially wipe out your entire garden or your entire crop. And aphids will feed on just about anything. These are tomato plants that have aphids, but they'll feed on vines, they'll feed on flowers, they'll feed on cucumbers, anything like that. They're really not picky when it comes to their host plant. If you do find aphids in your garden and you have a pretty severe infestation, one thing you can do to manage it is beneficial insects. So ladybugs are good beneficial for aphids, usually in their larvae stage, so not with the cute red spotted ladybugs that we see, but before they reach that stage of maturity, they feed on aphids. Ladybug larvae can feed on up to 5,000 aphids a day. So you can buy ladybugs online and release them into your garden. Another thing you can do is like a mineral oil-based spray. These oil-based sprays are usually organic. You can even buy like essential oil-based sprays like thyme oil or mint oil, things like that. Those oils are going to penetrate the body of the aphid because they're so soft, and they're basically going to suffocate it from the inside out. So you can also do that. Whenever you are using sprays, it's important to be careful because you want to make sure that you're following the label on the spray. You don't want to spray too late to where your tomatoes aren't going to be edible. You don't want to spray at the wrong time of day where you're going to burn your plants. And you don't want to spray too much to where you'll damage your plants, or too little to where you're not even going to harm the bugs at all. So another common garden insect you're going to see is squash bugs. These bugs not only attack squash, but basically any vining plant, pumpkins, cucumbers, watermelons, cantaloupes, any kind of vining plant a squash bug is going to find. I feel like squash bugs are also almost inevitable at any garden, especially because they overwinter in the garden. So for squash bugs, what you're going to look for is just, again, unhealthy looking damage. Another thing you can look for is eggs. So for squash bugs, you're going to look for these gray, tall, fast moving, solid bugs. They're really ugly. Squash bugs feed on the sap of plants. They feed on the vine, they feed on the flower, they feed on the fruit, they feed on the leaf. And their saliva is actually toxic to plants. That's why they kill them. And they can take out a whole vine within a week or two. And once the whole vines start to die, then they start feeding on the fruit. So you can literally lift up one of your melons and you'll see like a family of squash bugs underneath them. Squash bugs are a little bit harder to manage because their bodies are so hard, they're so dense. It's really hard for any kind of spray or anything to penetrate in there. One thing we've been doing at our garden to manage squash bugs is just every day we come out here and we check our plants. We look on the underside of the leaves and we kill any eggs we find, we kill any babies, any adults that we find with our hands, just because it's so difficult to kill them with sprays. Another suggestion I've seen is birds and bird feeders. So if you attract birds to your garden, the birds will eat the squash bugs. In one of our garden beds, we actually let our chickens kind of free range out there, and that's an effort to manage the squash bugs. So another pest that you might find in your garden, this one is actually pretty common on indoor or house plants also, are thrips. Thrips are tiny, almost microscopic, oval, soft-bodied insects. They're going to be found on the underside of leaves. They also like to hang out in the leaf veins or leaf margins. So if you just look along your leaf veins, that's where you're going to find thrips. To identify thrip damage, one thing you can look for is just kind of like a silvery patchy damage on your leaves. Thrips like to feed on new growth. They like to feed on that new flower buds, new leaves, new stems, anything new. Thrips like to feed on that. So you're going to want to check your new growth, and you're also just going to want to kind of look for that silvery patchy damage on your leaves. But thrips are actually a little bit easy to manage because they're so small and so soft that spiders, maybe even a assassin bug, something like that, could very easily eat a thrip. A variety of sprays, whether it's neem oil or thyme oil or something like that, is also very effective against thrips because they're so small and soft-bodied. And they don't really necessarily damage your fruit. So if you're growing tomatoes or these are beans, they're not really going to damage our beans, but they're going to damage the flowers that our beans come from. So that's why thrips are so important. Some more common garden insects that you might find. We don't have any examples in our garden right now, but tomato hornworm is another common garden pest. It's called tomato hornworm, but it actually feeds on a wide variety of plants. Tomato hornworm damage looks like just big holes in your leaves. A tomato hornworm can actually take down an entire plant in a day. So you're going to want to identify their damage fairly quickly. Tomato hornworms are usually black and white stripes. If they're disturbed, you can kind of rub on their head and they'll literally grow out little horns. So that's how you can identify what they look like. If you do find tomato hornworms in your garden, you can use a spray like this, BT, Bacillus thuringiensis. This is a beneficial bacteria. Basically, this is going to coat your leaves. The hornworms are going to eat it, and it's going to have a reaction with their digestive system to where it's just going to cause them to overfeed until they die. Another common garden pest you might see are mealybugs. Mealybugs are common on indoor plants also. Mealybug damage just kind of looks similar to aphid damage, where your leaves are just kind of curly and they look unhealthy. You flip over the leaf and you'll see a colony of just white, fuzzy, moving spots. Those are usually mealybugs. Mealybugs can be controlled with, again, a mineral oil spray. This is an example of a good mineral oil spray. The ingredients are peppermint oil, lemongrass oil, basically very fragrant oils. Those are typically really good for, again, getting into the bodies of the insects and kind of suffocating them from the inside out. So this would be a good option for mealybugs, thrips, aphids, things like that. Again, you want to make sure you're going by the label and you're spraying it correctly and you're spraying it at the correct time. Another common garden pest you might see are spider mites. Spider mites are microscopic, so they're kind of hard to see with the naked eye unless the infestation is severe. Then you can see a colony of spider mites. Their damage just literally looks like webs across your plants. It's going to be webs with colonies of tiny moving bugs. Spider mites can be controlled with, again, a mineral oil spray, or you can even buy microscopic mites, beneficial mites, to release into your garden. Beneficials are more commonly used, purchased and used in indoor operations because you can't really control where they go whenever they're outdoors. So aside from spraying and purchasing beneficial insects, there's some other management strategies that you can use to deter pests from your garden. One is called companion planting. This is basically just planting a variety of crops together in the same area. One example is marigolds. So putting marigolds in your garden, whether it's in between your rows of crops or just kind of scattered in your garden like this, marigolds actually attract ladybugs and ladybug larvae, so they're going to bring more ladybugs to your garden, which in turn is going to reduce your aphid population. Another good example of companion planting is incorporating herbs into your garden beds. Those fragrant plants like thyme, mint, parsley, cilantro. Those typically deter pests away from your garden because they don't like the strong scent. So maybe planting a border of thyme in your garden bed or just putting some mint here or there in between your plants is going to help reduce your pest population. Not all insects are bad for your garden. There are some insects that are actually beneficial. This is either because they pollinate or because they eat or hunt the bugs that are damaging to your garden. One good example and one common example is praying mantis. Praying mantis are beneficial because they'll eat the aphids, they'll eat the squash bugs, they'll eat just about anything. One downside to praying mantises is that they'll actually eat some of your pollinators and your other beneficial insects as well. Another good beneficial are green lacewings. Green lacewings, they move pretty fast through your garden, so they're kind of hard to see, but they're a green bug with wings that look lacy, hence their name. But those are also good predatory insects to have in your garden. Assassin bugs are also a good common one. They look kind of similar to a squash bug, but they have a stinger on the back on their butt. Squash bugs will also eat just about anything, even your beneficials. We actually found an assassin bug in the garden the other day and it had just killed a spider. So those ones are pretty gnarly. Also, pollinators. Pollinators, they don't really attack or eat other bugs, but they're essential and they are beneficial to our garden because they help pollinate our flowers, and that's where we get our fruit. Some common pollinators you might see are bees, bumblebees, and honeybees, lots of butterflies, hummingbirds, even flies pollinate. So another good way to deter pests from your garden is a method called banker plants. Banker plants are basically plants that you plant at the entrance or at the perimeter of your garden with the intention of the bugs are going to come in, they're going to stop at your banker plants, and they're not going to venture any further into your garden towards the crops that you actually want to save. So this is basically just starting a bed, starting a garden for the bugs, so that way they don't attack your good plants.
So one of the things that we become aware of when we get to growing food is these little bugs and things that come around. Some are helpful and some they just want to eat, and they eat a lot too when you let them go. In the past, I remember talking to my uncle about the foods that he grew in his like an acre wide garden, and many species. He grew tobacco, and this was way back in the early 60s when I saw him growing all this stuff. And I loved it. I loved his garden. I'd play in there, play with the corn, mess around with them, break them, and get in trouble. And that's how I learned. Well, get wiser that way. So the intent that I asked him about his planting process, and he just told me that's just the way he does it. I mean, I talked to his son later on about his methods, and he said that he planted a whole section of food for himself, and then he set aside another section for the other species, and told them, this is yours, this is over here is mine, so we share here. And so they never messed with his main garden, his food, but they were happy over here. I don't know how that works out, but having faith, love, humility, and this is one of the ways that I feel that we relate to other species in this world, this web of life, we call it. Achaga, they refer to the sacredness of these things, and that each species depends on the air, the water, the elements that we are made of is the same. So we have our relationship as being equal and being able to communicate with these things, like the corn. Of course, all the Muscogee people understand our relationship to the corn, at the same time, we have the relationship that includes other species that rely on our activities. So having that connection, humility, with humility, that we have a good life ahead of us. Not only of the plant itself, but the plant becomes part of us at one point. So moi no gashte. Imajajaga, they call it, the sacredness of all things. Imajajaga.
Widow for watching today's episode of the Mvskoke Gardening Series. Our garden is open to the public every Thursday from 11 to 12 here at the College of the Muscogee Nation.